My name is Stephen Quick, and in this video, we're going to explain what makes a forest old growth, and why we need to protect these unique ecosystems. We'll talk about our investigations of succession, disturbances, diversity, and structure, and if you stay till the end, we'll tie it all together and explain why it matters to everyone on the planet. Let's check it out. We're zooming in on the forest surrounding the Evergreen State College, most of which was clear-cut in 1939, but not our eon plot. In 2006, the college initiated a research project called the Evergreen Ecological Observation Network to monitor change within 44 plots throughout the forest. The plot we analyzed is a small 314 square meter circle of conifer and mixed hardwood forest. This particular plot was not logged in 1939, likely because it was previously owned by the J.J. Brenner Oyster Company. So although the area is dominated by late cereal species like western red cedar and western hemlock, signs of a past life remain all around. The Douglas fir is renowned in this region for many reasons. Its growth rate and limited foliage are mostly due to its thirst for light. That's what makes them opportunistic, driving the development of the old-growth forest. The Douglas fir and some hardwoods are typically the first to grow where the canopy opens up to allow light to the forest floor. As they grow, their branches cast shade where other plants can thrive without becoming scorched like the cedar and hemlock. Our shade-loving friends retain much more of their crown ratio than the Doug fir, so they can make better use of light filtered through the canopy. Eventually, possibly a millennia later, the Douglas firs migrate to the forest floor where they live out another millennia, supporting life all around them. In our eon plot, there are 8 cedars, a western hemlock, and 2 bigleaf maples, but there are Douglas fir remnants on the ground, and still one standing. This wise elder stands as tall as 125 feet, with a girth of nearly 43 inches, gaining 2 centimeters every year. We used a special tool called a clinometer to acquire variables for estimating height, as well as a tape for measuring diameter at breast height called a DBH tape, and a 30-meter measuring tape for distance. And with some trigonometry, we were able to accurately estimate the height of these trees. Many of the cedars here are at least half as tall as the Douglas fir, but none are growing in diameter as quickly, and even the tallest cedar is nowhere near as wide. Judging by the hardwoods here and their saplings, red alders and bigleaf maples may have even preceded the Douglas fir. This is a process called ecological succession. Succession is driven by disturbances to the forest system, which can take many forms and are integral to the development of what we call old-growth forests. Disturbance can be a small or massive fire, windstorm, or volcanic eruption, but it can also be slow-moving landslides, tectonic movement, or pest infestation. Its importance to the ecosystem is dependent on evolutionary adaptations and the species in that region. In most forests, wind is a ubiquitous disturbance, but the same cannot be said for fire, which is particularly important to the forests in the Pacific Northwest. The Douglas fir has thick, gnarled bark that hold a lot of water, and thus is resistant to fire. However, the thin bark and average terminal age of hardwoods make them much more susceptible to disturbance. This is illustrated in our eon plot, where we collected variables to estimate biomass volume of fallen and standing dead wood. Most of the downwoody debris in our plot are samples of the very few bigleaf maple, and most of the snags and fallen trees were western red cedar. However, the largest examples look like the broken bones of fallen giants, those Doug firs and their stumps. Since the inception of the EON project in 2006, the amount of downwoody debris has nearly doubled with broken pieces of bigleaf maple, but only one cedar tree has fallen. If none of them are growing very quickly either, they might be storing energy, waiting for their opportunity to fill in where the maple opens the canopy or where the Doug fir falls. These disturbances invariably change the structure of the forest, offering tree age and spatial diversity for the optimal development of wildlife niches for biological diversity. As trees in the forest grow taller and wider, they offer more unique niches for wildlife, and as they fall in decay, they offer even more unique niches for more unique wildlife. Many species of other classes of flora and fauna make their homes exclusively in forests that took millennia to develop this diverse structure, and the forest itself depends on some of these late cereal species to help regulate its own systems. Take Loberia, for instance, a genus of lichen that fixes nitrogen out of thin air. While there are some trees that are capable of fixing nitrogen and cycling it back into the community quickly, they don't do so everywhere, nor all on their own, and so the forest depends on a diverse collection of species with this characteristic. Biological diversity of vascular plants in the understory of our eon plot has actually become less rich since 2008. Bare ground cover has decreased by 7%, which was colonized mostly by western sword fern and Oregon grape, but the number of unique species decreased by 20% to 8. However, while biodiversity can seem to be struggling on a macro level, we can see the ecosystem is teeming with diversity at lower levels. Using a microplot survey method, we tested the diversity of types of mosses in our eon plots. We placed microplots 1 meter apart along 4 transects in each of the cardinal directions, and estimated coverage of each type of lifeform. This data was collected on the ground and resulted primarily in mats and wefts, but one look at a tree trunk or decaying log outside of our microplots would prove this is only a piece of the picture. We also used modified protocol to build a species list for our plot, which summed up to 16 species. The list included both bryophytes and lichens, each of them engaged in a perpetual exchange of nutrients with its host. It's important to remember that biodiversity is much more complex than the number of species, and it really depends where you're looking. There are only 60,000 total species of trees and roughly 9 million species of plants, but there are over 30 million species of insects. Most of them, along with 50 to 60,000 species of mycorrhizal fungi, inhabit the soil, where they not only decompose material, but they also facilitate nutrient exchange. Most nutrient exchange in the forest occurs in the upper O and A horizons, which are generated by decomposing forest litter. By way of electrochemical and ion gradients, nutrients are in a perpetual state of change in the soil. Most trees only send roots down below these horizons for access to water. The rest of the roots spread throughout the upper layers, making associations with mycorrhizal fungi and trading sugars made in their leaves for the minerals broken down in the soil. A single tree the size of the Douglas fir in our eon plot can be connected to and trading with dozens of other trees through the network of mycorrhizal fungi. However, the soil plays another integral role in the ecosphere. It breathes carbon. The difference of one breath from another is one way we can consider the health of the forest soil. We used some classic scientific tools to collect and sieve soil core samples from the upper 30 centimeters of our eon plots. 4 samples were dried and the bulk density was measured before it was analyzed for carbon and nitrogen. Based on these samples, the forest soil surrounding the college is storing about 80 tons of carbon per hectare. As leaves and trees fall to the ground and decompose, carbon accumulates in the soil, and until recently, it was commonplace to tidy up the forest, if you can believe it. The accumulation of carbon in a forest is also regarded as carbon sequestration. We rely on these forests and their soil to help regulate atmospheric conditions and mitigate the effects of climate change. We considered everything we've just discussed to estimate the total amount of carbon stored in the college's 1,000-acre forest. Including the layer of forest litter above the soil, downwoody debris, plants in the understory, the soil itself, and the trees, our plot predicts that there are 446 tons of carbon per hectare. Less carbon is stored in the plants and floor litter relative to dead wood in the soil, but the trees themselves made up nearly 300 tons of carbon per hectare. Our Douglas fir alone is holding on to nearly 6 tons of carbon, which is equivalent to the weight of 2 Ford F-250s. In comparison, our largest western red cedar is holding nearly 1 ton, and our largest fallen Douglas fir is still holding more than a quarter ton of carbon after decades, possibly a century, of decay. In 100 years' time, this area may in fact be considered old growth, completely dominated by western red cedar and western hemlock, interspersed with short-lived, opportunistic Douglas firs, alders, and maples, with a complex structure and richer biodiversity the deeper you look. This should help you define the term old growth and illustrate the importance of structurally and biologically diverse forests to the world. Thank you for watching.